this is really interesting. Donnie O'Sullivan of CNN did a report about a woman who spent an entire year, a journalist, an entire year dating not just far-right men, but extreme, fringe, far-right men, and then has takeaways. And the takeaways are important and interesting just on an individual level, but then you kind of extrapolate them to broader societal problems we're having with radicalized, primarily men, and how maybe the steps for some of them towards de-radicalization are really a lot simpler than they might feel. And the underlying systemic issues we have here of people not feeling an identity attached to a community, feeling like they have a purpose, can explain some of why people are being radicalized into really extreme views that now for men are being targeted a message of misogyny, that your identity should come from how much you can get control over a woman, right? That's the sort of Andrew Tate message, or these racist ideologies that your identity can come from the fact that you are opposed to, hateful of, and then take identity in your own race. And I think for some of the folks we're talking about here, there is just a core hatred, and they're going to be too far gone. But some of the broader issues we're dealing with because people are feeling detached from who they are, from what is their identity as a man. Well, it has to be, macho man Andrew Tate sort of archetype. It's like, no. But there has to be an alternative message for people so that as people grow up and you can feel lost and you can feel like, I don't really know what it means to be me, to be a man, whatever, that there's a message there for you that isn't radical and that isn't so societally deteriorating. And so let's listen to, this is independent journalist Vera Papisova for this report by Donnie Sullivan on CNN.
Got in the cage with former UFC star turned podcaster Jake Shields to explore the manosphere and why exactly it's so popular.
They speak liberal, they have liberal friends, and then they go online and they are a white supremacist.
This is Vera Papisova. She spent the last year dating far-right men in New York City for a story for Cosmopolitan magazine.
They're the most insecure men I've ever sat down with. It was really difficult to have some of these dates because they were so insecure, because they don't really know who they are and they don't know how to figure that out.
She said the men she dated got all their news and information from the so-called manosphere.
They did not listen to anything else. They're only listening to independent media, and they're only listening to men talking to men.
The manosphere is made up of macho podcasters and influencers.
There's no such thing as an independent female.
Most women have zero concept of money.
Females don't have independent thought.
It's a space where UFC fighters are among those who reign supreme.
They love the UFC guys. They love the MMA guys because those guys do what they can. They're modern gladiators. They're badass.
Badass.
Yeah, so I'll play more for you, but you see how, again, some of them, it's so deep to the core hatred, you won't even waste your time. But there are others that are getting sucked into what people call the manosphere, and I think Andrew Tate we can use as a representative of a lot of different influencers who have emulated that. We need a Bugatti and we gotta be the top G, and I'm gonna talk about, I'm joking about sexually assaulting women, and it's so much about your domination over women. And what that is there's a lot of resentment wrongfully placed by men who, in a world where women have become so independent and they can pursue their careers, not as reliant necessarily on men, then a lot of men all of a sudden feel like they are going to, instead of looking inward about their struggles with relations with women and their own identity struggles, the manosphere gives a very simple, wrong, gross answer to that big question, which is the reason why you're not seeing success with women, or not understand, or having difficulty. We all have difficult relationships, but you're having difficulties. And the reason that you feel insecure is because they aren't in their place, right? And then sort of that primal and regressive urge and impulse that often, and this shows up in so many ways throughout the history of humanity, that, oh, I can feel up higher if I'm pushing somebody down, right? That's like an easy answer that so often leads to actual atrocities, but is the simple answer to people's own insecure questions. And I'm not even using insecure derogatorily. We all, about different things and at different times, are insecure. But how you deal with that and how you get over it is a really important thing. And a lot of men now in this fast changing world, we've seen how racist ideas will get inflamed as there's this hateful backlash to a world that is progressing. And you're seeing a similar thing with sexist ideas, where there'll be this explosion of niche content that gives people a simple and wrong answer to questions they have about a changing world that sometimes makes them feel left behind. So then we'll get to, after playing more of this, how do we provide a message that is strong to our values and our principles of equality, and that still could resonate with people about how you find that purpose and identity in a societally beneficial instead of deteriorating way. But we'll get to that in a second. Here's more.
But Vera says hate isn't what the men she dated were really looking for.
One of these guys brought me to a political meeting.
And did they talk about politics?
Barely. They talked about, it was a bunch of men complaining about girlfriends and wives, regurgitating Andrew Tate type of advice about how to train your girlfriend, how to train your wife to be submissive. And so this group was supposed to be a political group, but they're talking about relationship problems. And the fact that that's what most of the time was spent on, you don't need to be a neo-Nazi. You need therapy.
The appeal of Jake's podcast speaks to a need among young men in this country that Vera says can't be ignored.
You have to incentivize someone to want to be better. You can't just say, let's make men better. The thing about these guys is their biggest support system is online, but that also is very isolating, and isolation is what breeds hatred.
Groups like Patriot Front offer community, but community based on racism and hate.
People have to really think about, do you have the capacity to talk to people that you don't agree with? Because that one nice conversation you might have might change someone's day enough to not have to seek out help in an online support group, which is actually a bunch of white supremacists using political beliefs as an excuse for how they feel.
Yeah, and she's deriving from this experience of dating, which, thank you for going through that, because a lot of people wouldn't want to have to go through that. Extreme right-wing men for years, some really profound takeaways. And I really have seen as the most effective way to compel people to change for the better, which sometimes, and I know I can already see some of the comments that are going to be on this video, a lot of people's response will be, I don't want to do that. They don't deserve my time, my conversations. Fine, not for everybody. But whenever you do meet someone, and I'm not talking about someone who's, again, fallen off that deep end already, but who's kind of toying with extremism, and a lot of young, and I'm talking like late elementary school, middle school boys are starting to watch figures like Andrew Tate telling them that they should be going around telling women that you gotta go and make me a sandwich is a big phrase they use. And then kids are coming to school and saying that to their teachers, and a very malleable brain is being shaped in the worst of ways. But the way that often you can show people they're in the wrong, it's usually not by shouting at them. And in certain venues, it is, but privately, and family members and friends, I think it's by showing them what the fruits of and what the outcome of your ideology is. And so I've really found that people seeing the way I'm going to treat you, I'm going to show you how I will treat you. That's because That's the outcome of what I believe in, is that you should be treated with respect. You should be uplifted. And even just subconsciously, people seeing, oh, he is making me feel good and seen, and he holds a certain set of principles. Maybe those principles aren't so bad. So that's one basic thing that I just think as you go through life, the better that you can lead by example, the more people who will be interested in doing the same and in following those principles. And then I think as it pertains to what model of a man are we wanting to exhibit with our sets of principles? Because it feels a little bit weird to discuss on a political show until you realize a lot of our political reality is driven by these underlying problems people are dealing with and identity struggles. And so I think a big thing that has led to the radicalization of a lot of men to the right wing is that they have a lot of people to go watch online who seem cool, who seem like they're crushing life. A lot of it's fake, a lot of it's portrayed for the cameras, but that I'm in a very simplistic way a warrior, right? I'm literally fighting, as one example. Or I'm really rich, or those sorts of imagery things to a young boy looking for identity can catch him. And there's a bunch of those. There's not really a lot of influencers who both just provide general life advice, general principle articulation, and seem like they're crushing life, who then also tell you about how you deal with a relationship struggles as a man, and in putting it in those terms. I think as liberals, sometimes we fear just speaking in those terms. What does it mean to be a man in today's society? And there are those people, like I know in my private life, some of the most incredible, studly men who are liberal, who stand for the absolute right principles, and who would be great influencers. But I don't think that personality type is as prone to wanting to go and shout at cameras. Like the personality type of Andrew Tate, you get why him, so attention hungry, is going to go out and try to get a bunch of followers. And then all of a sudden he's the role model for people, funneling them in the exact wrong direction. And so more liberal men who get into different sectors of online content. It's not just politics. It has to be, you're talking about like the examples from the right wing, you see that they're talking about sports related things. They're talking about, UFC, and then just gender relations and cultural issues. And if you could have good role models that show a really awesome image of what being a grown up, thriving male can look like in today's society, that people can resonate with, and that have components of, I know this is kind of a funny, simple term to keep using, but just have components of being cool. It just seems like they have a cool life and they seem cool. And again, there are those people you'll meet in real life a bunch, but putting that out in an algorithmically successful way is also really important when a lot of people, as she noted, are just getting their information online. And so you need those things to go viral and for people to then have something to resonate with and see themselves in. And I think the advice that can be given is that you hurt yourself in every way, and you hurt others, and you undermine societal progress, and you undermine key tenets of equality when you make your identity the belittling of and the pushing down of women or of other races, if that's where people are being radicalized towards. And that is a profound sign of your own weakness and insecurity, that you can only define your strength by others' weakness. That's how it has to be framed in their head. And a message that says that's actually you failing and being weak and choosing to scapegoat. But obviously it can't just be denouncing the other message that people are hearing, but a clear affirmative message about, I do think it starts with quick fix advice. And then you have the longer term ideological things that get instilled into people that I'll circle back to in a second. But like, I think fitness, more people encouraging fitness among young men and boys, and talking about how you can feel a lot better in life if you put some work into fitness. And some of your identity can come from you're going to be a hard worker. Right now, you don't have many options. Let's say you're in school, you're mostly in school. That's kind of what you're focused on. But find a little bit of time to do yourself a service of being fit. But right now, so many of the fitness influencers are, go to the gym. And I'm thinking, heck yeah, that's good. Love it. And also, hey, Hitler wasn't so bad. What? And so some of those influencers that encourage, get your mind right. Maybe you wake up early. Maybe you have a morning routine video where you rip off tape. You never know. Do some good stuff, but it doesn't have to segue into the crazy right-wing stuff. And instead, a message about strength and your value comes from, in many ways, your service of others. So obviously you're not going to try to push down others. And then the service to yourself is fulfilling some purpose, some passion. That purpose is not going to come from your ownership of somebody else or whatever, but that you are going to do something and others are going to be impressed with the fact that you care and are pursuing something. And so let me just give some specific examples. For me, one of the reasons that I feel like I've lived a really mentally stable and happy, generally life is that super early it was instilled in me that you got to find a passion and you got to focus on that. So I wasn't seeking an identity in all these other regressive ideas because I was so passionate about different things. It was music at one point, and I jumped all around, right? It doesn't have to be the same thing your whole life. And it was being a dolphin trainer at one point, and then it was sports at one point, and then it obviously ultimately became politics. And my mind was always so consumed with the thing that I was on, and that's what I was talking about to people, and that's what I was passionate about. Jaden and Cole, who are in the room, the producers, they both really early got into production and video and creating movies and creating edits of things. And that I remember from early, we knew each other very early, that was something I was like, that's kind of cool. And they found identity in that and value in that among other things. So it could be a hobby, it could be a career pursuit, it could be that you want to figure out economically whatever you got to do to create a stable situation so you can start a family and have a happy, healthy, thriving family. And that you're going to be taking steps from early to do that. And you're going to get up early, you're going to work out, you're going to do your meditation in the morning, you're going to write out your goals for that day. All those things that sometimes you'll hear in the manosphere. Fine advice. Great. Work hard. Yeah. Be healthy. Yes. Be productive. But then it should all be because you're trying to build something that's worthwhile and that's good. That's good for the society, the community that you're in. And I think that if we encourage people to find, again, it doesn't have to be. We have a really special, that I'm so grateful for, situation where that was both of their passions and this was my passion. I was yammering about politics to people and they're and now I get to do it for a living. So that's just magical. That's amazing. But even if it's something completely different, other members of my family got really passionate really early about the military. That's what they're now doing. And then outside of, I know people who are really invested in community organizations that support the community. That's not even their work, but they just, outside of work time, really care about an organization that seeks to uplift people's lives in their community. It could be that you're really into art and those things, however big or small they play a role in your life, however much they're crossing over with a career or your family, or if you find something that gives you a little bit of excitement, a little motivation, something that you're doing this for, it ends up that other people are impressed with that, however niche. It could be a really random interest that you have. And you feel like every day you're going to a job, you may not like the job that much, but it's because then after work, you have the time and money to work on that thing that you like. People around you, and then this is a big important thing that men and boys are looking for advice on right now on social media, and then girls or romantic partners or prospective romantic partners find that impressive. And people in general like when, and are impressed by people, others who seem like they care about something. They're working towards something. And that, I think, could be a strong part of a message that abides by our liberal principles, but maybe resonates with people who are looking for some identity. And I really do admire, again, talking about the family member I referenced, a guy who knows what he wants in life, is working hard, who's serving the country, and who's always had a really clear vision for his why. And that's what people need. They need an answer to the question, why? Why am I doing this? Who am I? What am I doing? And there is a message there, because I heard it my whole life. And doesn't require, and actually does the opposite, doesn't require hurting anyone, but actually ends up serving people. Share your thoughts in the comments.